Hello. This is part 2 of my discussion on building review systems with pseudo-long term. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I definitely recommend you check it out. In part 1, I talked about what things to consider when deciding which review system you want to choose to reach a specific target of cubes sub hour. In this second part, I'll talk about how to build dynamic review systems that help you to keep adding cubes as you progress to more cubes sub hour. Let's assume that you can do a certain amount of cubes sub hour right now, maybe around 20, and you are looking to build a review system that will allow you to gradually increase the number of cubes as you continue to push your speed. In general, I would say that a heavy long term would be a good place to start. This should offer a solid ground from which you can build up to more cubes. An example of this would be about 75% of the cubes long term to start, and then the rest pseudo long term, with just one 3-blind cube at the end. From this, a simple progression is to add a few short-term cubes once you reach sub hour. After getting sub hour with this, you can move up to adding medium-term cubes, or maybe even a lot of medium-term cubes so you can take out the short-term. And then once you get the medium-term sub hour, you can put back in the short-term cubes to get even more cubes sub hour. If you follow this entire process, at the end, you will probably be around double the number of cubes from where you started, which means you will be approaching a lighter long term. To further increase the number of cubes from here, I would recommend considering increasing the number of long-term cubes, or pseudo-long-term cubes, and then repeating a similar progression to continue to increase the number of cubes sub hour. In this way, it becomes almost a cyclical process of continual growth, or progress. So let's go through an example of this. First, I'll describe an example progression of someone starting at around 10 cubes. So in this case, we can start with an extremely heavy 12 cubes long term. The entire attempt in this case, in the beginning, is just going to be long-term cubes. After getting these 12 cubes sub hour, a next step could be adding in maybe an extra 3 short-term cubes and a 3-blind cube, for a total of 16 cubes. After this is sub hour, you could move up to putting 3 extra pseudo-long-term cubes in. And then, once you get this, you can add 6 pseudo-long-term cubes. At this point, we're at 22 cubes sub hour, which is over double of where we started, which was 10. Okay, so for a second example, let's start at the 22 cubes sub hour mark, exactly where we stopped here, and let's say we want to continue to progress. We can take a similar approach to the previous case and start with 24 cubes long term. This will take some time to adjust, of course, but it'll create a good ground from where we can continue to progress. Of course, another option could be 18 cubes long term and then 6 pseudo, but for the sake of this example, let's go with 24 cubes long term. From here, we can simply add the 3 short-term cubes and a 3-blind cube to push it up to 28 cubes. From here, an option that we could do is drop the 3 short-term cubes and go straight into using 6 pseudo-long-term cubes. After we get this sub hour, we can add back in the 3 short-term cubes. After this, another option could be take the short-term cubes out again and add in some medium-term cubes. And then once we get sub hour, we can add in the short-term cubes one last time. And at this point, we're at 40 cubes sub hour. Okay, so this back and forth process of taking out the short-term cubes to add in cubes with extra reviews is generally what I would say would be a stepwise progression of a review system, or at least what a stepwise progression of a review system can be. But I'd like to add an additional aspect for you to consider. This structure that I gave is great for making simple progress that you don't need to think too much about. However, if you're looking for the fastest progress possible, it might be worth considering building an even more granular progression of review systems so that you are consistently practicing all aspects of your review system as you progress. In other words, building a review system progression that changes the number of long-term, pseudo-long-term, and medium and short-term cubes back and forth within the same number of cubes to allow for you to practice improving each one of these aspects. An advantage of this more granular approach is that it allows for you to try more different types of review systems and find which one matches best your memorization style, as well as having alternate practice sessions where the focus might shift between higher memorization challenge and higher recall challenge. For examples of this, I'd recommend looking at my Progress Diary series. In episode 14, I discuss my personal progression of review systems, so feel free to check that out if you want to know more about my specific progression of review systems. On the other hand, if you're looking for more just to practice multi-blind on the casual side and you don't really want to think about review systems too much, then one option can be to simply decrease the granularity of review systems. What I mean by this is to simply pick maybe one or two review systems and have a higher cube jump between them so that you can stick to the same review system for a longer time. For example, maybe picking one review system for 28 cubes, another for 34, and another for 40 cubes. The disadvantage of this is that it might be harder for you to be able to consistently do sub-hour attempts at home, as you significantly increase the number of cubes for each review system. On the other hand, this approach creates a more simple and direct approach to multi-blind, which might be easier for you depending on your preferences. One final note that I would like to add is that not every choice of review system will necessarily always work best. As you continue to progress, you might develop different strengths in different aspects of multi-blind, or you might find that different approaches become more viable or even better for your recall. I personally have had to completely change my review system multiple times as I've progressed. So I would recommend you to always be open to trying new review systems as you progress, as you may find that different systems might work better for you with your current skill level. Also, remember that it might take a few attempts before you're actually able to accurately determine how well the review system is working for you. So make sure to give it a few tries before you make your final decision. As always, please feel free to ask me any questions down below. Choosing a review system is not an exact process, and there isn't really a best review system that will work for everyone. Have fun experimenting with new review systems, and best of luck on your multi-blind progress.